Okay, so let's see if this works. So one thing that students usually get confused about is a manipulated versus a measured variable. So a manipulated variable is something we're measuring, right? Usually in our study design, it's a dV. A manipulated variable, usually it's the IV, but the confusing part is that an IV is not always manipulated. So for it to be manipulated, as a researcher, you have to have control over it. That means you can choose which level of your independent variable your participants experience. So for example, if the lighting of the room, right, was one of my IVs, maybe I have some participants do this lighting, right? So they have this much lighting, and some participants get that much lighting. I want to see how lighting impacts their eye strain, right? I have them do a task on paper, and I want to see, well, how does this lighting versus that lighting impact how much participants strain their eye, right? So that's manipulated because I can choose some participants to get that much light, and I can choose some participants to get that much light. Now, lighting, let me get this back on, might be actually a third variable, an issue in your experiment that you actually don't care about. Let's say I'm looking at how caffeine impacts attention during a lecture. I don't care about lighting, but some participants get, well, actually, let me turn that off. Some participants participate in this room, it's a living room, right? With this much lighting, you can see there's a big window there, right? And some participants get this room. Actually, this room is much brighter. And let's say I just have a bunch of participants participate here in this very bright room. This is actually my parents' house. And some people get this darker room. You'd think it would be brighter as a living room, but it's not. So that actually might be an issue, right? Because, well, what if lighting is impacting how much attention people can pay because it wakes them up in the brighter room? It's not my IV. I don't actually care about that, and it might cause an issue. I can actually, let's go back to the original experiment. Let's say I still care about lighting and how that impacts eye strain. Right, so I just gave you an example about how lighting can be a confound, okay? So keep in mind that for any study design, we want to look for what's manipulated versus what's measured. Now, earlier I gave you an example of a manipulated variable. Now let me give you an example of a study that only has measured variables. So let's say I'm interested in comparing male and female participants, so using traditional categories of sex, or what you would normally see in older studies. Maybe traditional is not the best word, but you have male and female categories for sex that you're using in your study, and you're interested in comparing male and female participants, right? And you're interested in seeing, well, how do male and female participants, how do they compare in terms of their comfort with a male instructor? Does the sex of the instructor make a difference in how comfortable students are in class? Maybe that's my question, right? So in this case, that IV of the participant's sex, as a researcher, I don't have control over that, right? I can't say, you're gonna be male, you're gonna be female, right? So because of that, that still is an IV in my study, but it's not manipulated, right? Now, manipulated is when I can choose what level of the IV, focus on the IV, what level of the IV the participants can experience. So for example, with lighting, I can choose, let me actually run over here. I can choose for you to get this lighting or that lighting. So that can be a manipulated variable. So you have to carefully read examples and see, was it manipulated or not? And keep in mind the difference between measured versus manipulated variables. If you have any questions, let me know. How do I stop? Nope.